All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mythos Vanesia, the Living Lore Q&A. This is the third stream that I've done related to my game, wherein I open up questions and let you ask anything that you'd like about my very expansive and constantly growing world of Vanis. So some of you have already tuned in a couple of times by now. You may be familiar with my previous streams at this point. You may have seen a little bit about the world, but I'm just going to assume that you haven't. So I will throw up, until I get a digital one, my little map here of my continents of the world of Vanis, just so that you can get a brief glance at it. So last time on my Living Lore Q&A, we talked about the Moon Elves. We delved deep into the lore of the secret lands of Lavalon, the home of the Moon Elves. We talked about deep sea creatures and what terrors lurk underneath the oceans. We touched on the pirate lords of the Isles of Rem. So, of course, I am here and ready to talk about whatever questions you might have. So please ask away. On recommendation, I am going to actually put some music on in the background this time. I hope that you will excuse the fact that I'm using the same background music over and over. It's just there's very little good royalty-free music out there, so we'll put that just underneath everything. So, currently open to questions. If you have anything that you'd like to ask about the world, please do. We can open with some prompts. Since we talked about Lavalon last time, I will perhaps prompt the conversation with just a little bit of info about the gods of Vanis. So in total, there are, well, quite a few gods. It is at roughly 26 gods as far as the known ones go. There are several that are secret as well. Some that my players have uncovered, some that they have not. But let's talk about the main pantheon. So up at the top of the pantheon, you have Sorgaia, the Lady of Fate and the Future, and you have Vanis, the Lord of Darkness and Vanishing. Known as the Mother and Father, these two gods are consistently at odds in the recent age, although historically and according to the lore, they often work together, and of course were the mother and father of many other gods within this world. But at the current moment, there is a brief peace treaty between the two factions that are underneath Surgaia and Vanis. You have the Order of Fate up in the north, stationed in Oromea on the Terrador Peninsula. And then you have the Cathedral of Mist down in the south, who worship Vanis. These two have been at war since a little after the year zero. And are currently enjoying a 10-year truce, which is the longest in history, because of the Auric Treaty in the capital of Albion on the central continent. So there you have the two at the head of the pantheon. But then you have their children, their direct descendants. Ardent, god of growth and civilization. You have Aurum, goddess of gold and greed. You have Zur, the god of the golden sun. And you have Sanguinem, the god of first life, and the dragon of blood. I think that should hopefully be enough to prompt a few questions, so I will stop talking for a moment and allow anybody that wants to go ahead and throw a question at me. I see nothing just yet, as far as questions. So why don't we continue on just a little bit. Please feel free to interrupt my talking by asking a question. I will always give precedence to, or preference rather, to any questions that are asked in chat. So skipping past the first gods, we also have some of the later gods. Some of these gods were created by the mother and father. Some of them came into being, some of them descended from other worlds. Up at the top of this list you have Ember, partner to Zur. As Zur is the god of the golden sun, Ember is the god of the red sun. This is a binary system. So you have both suns up in the sky. Legend has it that Ember was created to keep Zur company after he flew into the sky and burst into the first sun. You have one of the earlier gods, sister to Sanguinem, Thresh. Sister being a relative term, Sanguinem sort of granted her life in the first place, but gods, you can never really understand quite how they work. Thresh is the goddess of forest and nature. She is the patron of the druids. She has no clerics or paladins. It is the druids who do her work. Or rather, actually, she has only 2 clerics and 2 paladins. 2 to tend her singular main temple and train the next generation, and the other 2 to go out into the world and do her work. But continuing on, you have Dulce, who is the god of indulgence and bounty, also the god of harvest. He is the one that is worshipped by farmers and hunters. Not so much hunters, but definitely farmers, in order to ensure a bountiful harvest. However, he is also the god of indulgence and lust, and so obviously the patron deity of parties and alcohol. A very fun god, and a little bit of a trickster. We will skip over some that are not very well known. But next on the list we have Rance. Rance is the lord of storms and lightning. Now his worship is most commonly shown in the land of King Ra, up in the northeast, but he, being the lord of storms and lightning, is not necessarily a good god. He is considered chaotic, neutral, or evil, because he is a force of nature. Most of his worship revolves around just appeasing him and ensuring that, you know, storms are not too bad, destructive, deadly, all of that. After that, we have Wraith, lord of death and the afterlife. Now, there are actually 2 death gods in my world. Wraith is the lord of the afterlife. He is in charge of sorting the souls that come into the lands of death and sending them on to their final destination, and of keeping those that are not assigned into the care of any god. But his partner, Fetter, Lady of Souls and the Grey River, is in charge of ferrying the souls unto death. Her body is said to comprise the Grey River, which is the metaphor, and in some instances the physical manifestation of the channel of death, where the soul will drift off through the astral sea and on towards the plane of death. I will take a brief pause here again, as I wait and see if we have any questions. Thank you very much, Standing Wolf. Welcome I appreciate the follow. And Slev, hello. No worries. Questions are not, of course, a requirement. They just kind of help drive the stream. But I came prepared, just in case we didn't have any. So I can continue on in just a moment to talk about the gods of my world. Just a moment as I am typing away over here. Okay, well, with no new questions, let us forge onward with Khaldun, Lord of the Forging Flame. So Khaldun is a very interesting god in the pantheon. He is the god of the forge of flame, of war, and of retribution. Not necessarily a good god, but very widely worshipped, of course, because war is quite popular across the world. He is known to be a treacherous god, a double-edged blade to most, and this is in fact his symbol. He is respected, of course, by smiths and miners, but since his primary domain, but as the Lord of the Forging Flame, the creations that are bound to his name are most often weapons of war, and thus war is often his domain. The reason he's considered treacherous is because his domain of conflict, of war, is judged on a knife's edge. You must be wary that should you follow Khaldun, should you give him praise, at any moment, the delicate balance of a just and noble cause for can slip quickly into the pits of blind ambition or conquest. And this is where Khaldun meets out retribution. Should you not have conviction in your conflict, should you not have a just reason, then he may just as easily betray you. Continuing on, we have Alunair, goddess of the moon. Now, she, of course, is a major goddess. Alunair shines bright in Nokt's nights, Nokt being the lord of night and darkness. She stands as a beacon in dark times, and her few clerics and paladins fight against the evil beings of night, calling upon her to break through the darkness. Her domains also include light, revelation, and protection, not just the moon. And the Moon Elves of Lavalon, of course, hold her sacred. A large part of their society is dedicated around worship of Alunair and following her teachings, essentially, protecting her creeds. Alunair does also hold domain over secrets. She has that dichotomy, that duality. While she is the goddess of revelation, unveiling hidden truths, she's also the goddess of secrets, hiding them in the darkness of night. But, more to the point, we also have Nokt. And Nokt is a major and well-known evil god. Nokt is the primal deity of night. Before there was day, there was just night. And so here you have the Lord of Night and Darkness. His worship is not allowed in pretty much any land, because it is a dark form of worship. He rules not just over the night as well, but over the darkness that clouds the minds of men and overtakes their hearts. He is bent consistently upon the corruption of Alunair and her light, to drag her down into his darkness and to take back the primal force of night, and not allow her light to break through it anymore. Of course, this would be a terrifying existence for anyone should it happen, not simply because light would be banished from the nights, but also because Alunair and her power is responsible for the weaving of the veil, the barrier between the worlds that blocks creatures from just filtering in from other planes and taking control. But moving past those two, let's go next to Adwyn. So the goddess of magic is known as Adwyn, Lady of the Tome. She is one of the few gods whose lore points directly to the fact that she was not always a god. Back in the Primal Age, when the first mortals were first walking upon the earth, the creations of Sanguinum, the great drakes, the dragons, and the dragonborn, she was one who, in a unique challenge to Sir Gaia, was allowed ascension into godhood, and she took over the domains of knowledge. This is where she began, but later, as the veil was woven, as the rules of magic changed entirely for Vanis, she began to write their rules to command over that knowledge of the arcane. Next we have Crest, Lord of the Waves. So this one should be obvious. Crest is, of course, god of the oceans and god of the life that dwells within it. And so he's one of the more interesting gods in the classic lore, because while many of the gods of Vanis came from its surface in some way, or as children from some of the first gods, Crest actually fell from the heavens. He is known to be otherworldly, which is part of the attribution to the very heavy difference between the creatures of the ocean and the creatures of the land. This alien physiology that they experience comes from he himself being alien to this world. He doesn't have a lot of interaction with the peoples of the land. You don't see his worship pretty much anywhere inland, but you will see traders and pirates and any seafaring individual will, of course, seek to worship and appease him to ensure that their journey is safe. So next we have Fleur. And Fleur is the partner to Dulce, who I mentioned earlier. Dulce being the god of indulgence and bounty. You then have Fleur, who, quite differently, is the lord of beauty. They hold domain over art, beauty, inspiration. They are, of course, heavily worshipped by bards, by painters, by anybody seeking inspiration from the world. And it isn't, of course, just arts and artisans, architects, people like that, but anybody seeking inspiration or new beginnings turns to Fleur. Interestingly, Fleur is also said to be the inspiration for flowers. Thresh took from their beauty and made the first flowers of Vanis. And this factors heavily into their depictions, of course. They're always depicted very flowery in some way. Now, I believe that covers the main gods, at least the ones that are known. So let's double back and talk about some, just a couple of minor gods. Two minor gods that you might hear about, should you interact with the world, are Verdant and Xian. They are talked about mostly in away from larger civilizations, in small towns or in like tribal groups, because Verdant is the Lord of Summer, and Xian is the Lady of Winter. So the reason I call them lesser gods is because their domains hold little sway over the rest over like the large domains that most people are concerned about: the sun, the earth, the moon. They hold sway over the changing of the seasons. So the legend goes, the lore goes, that each spring, Verdant rises from slumber to battle Shein, the Lady of Winter. At summer's first day, each year, he is crowned the victor, and a festival is held in his honor called the Gallant Green Festival. He takes his throne, and he sits throughout the summer, and then on the first day of fall, Shein will descend again from the glacial north to wage war upon Verdant. Come winter, she slays him and takes up the crown, plunging the world into cold. In this week, a festival of mourning is held, meant to bring together communities to help each other through harsh winters. So they are locked in a constant turning cycle that is the heart, the source of the changing of seasons in the world. Some people pass this off, of course, as an urban legend. Even some people that participate in the festivals don't necessarily believe in Verdant and Shein, but their depictions are still held up as tradition. Now, since I don't believe that I have any players here today, I can just make mention of a couple of the gods that they may not be aware of. So there is a goddess by the name of Esper. She is not well known at all, and in fact, knowledge of her is frequently hidden. Esper is the goddess of space and the far planes. Obviously, this is the reason why knowledge is often hidden about her. It's the reason why a lot of people don't discover her, too, because planar travel... knowledge of the planes in itself is very esoteric in this world. Planar travel is very difficult. So knowledge of the far planes in particular, extremely esoteric. Being very enigmatic and uncommon, the rumors that surround her, for those that do hear about her, range from being a guardian of the pathways to other worlds to their creator or even their caretaker. Now, how much of this is true is up for interpretation. Whispers say her power may even be greater than the first dragon lords, and her origin in the pantheon is unknown. Of course, it's obvious that she came from outside this world. Her clerics and paladins, those that follow her, belong to a secret sect known as the Speakers of the Silent Stars. They're not known throughout the world. Very, very few encounter them. And when people do hear about them, or attempt to find them, it is known that you do not find them, they find you. When they are needed, they will come. They are often seen where tears in space occur, or creatures of the far planes slip through. If aberrations become an issue upon the world, then it is the Speakers of the Silent Stars that you will see taking care of these beasts. Of course, people who do see them often don't remember. Being a group of powerful psionics, which is often how people join. Powerful psionics are sought out to join this order. They can obfuscate themselves from view, and they can erase themselves from people's memory, thus keeping their order secret. Delving into some evil gods, we have the crowning god of all of the evil gods, Felis, the Lord of Evil. However, he's also known as the god of holy war. So although people often reference him as having the domains of evil, war, destruction, and dark fortune, holy war was his original domain. He was the first god to ever be born as a true child of Surgaya and Vanis, the mother and the father. In other words, rather than, for example, being cut from their scales or born from their blood, Surgaya actually birthed Felis. He was brought into being in order to quell the ancient battle that Aurum had started when she had sown greed into the hearts of the first people on the face of Vanis, into the first dragon and dragonborn. They rose up against Surgaya and Vanis, against their creators and against gods. And because of the powers that existed in the world at the time, they nearly won this battle. But Surgaya and Vanis birthed Felis, the Lord of Holy War, and he gathered the devout, the followers. He offered respite to those who still truly believed, and forged them into an army and fought back, eventually defeating the uprising. Unfortunately, because of the dichotomy of ideals that existed within him that he embodied, he eventually also betrayed the mother and father. In the Second Dragon's Blood War, he rose against them, believing that the only way to truly save the world was to destroy the remainder of the gods and the sentient creatures of the world. In this respect, he brought into being a couple of other gods. Some of his children. There are a few, but the one that I will talk about is the one that is likely to be of consequence to the world, and that would be Cinna, the Lady of Madness. She was the daughter of Noct, born from the madness that formed in his own mind at these conflicting ideals that he embodied. She has very few temples left in existence, having been mostly eradicated, but she rose to power a couple of times through history, through a powerful cult that spread her influence by shattering people's minds and driving them to madness. With the domains of confusion, chaos, and madness, her goals are very difficult to understand for mortals, and oftentimes make no sense. But she is the one that sows madness into the hearts and minds of men. Not one of Noct's children, but also an evil god. We have the god Zeramis. Now, this information was recently discovered by my players. Zeramis participated, actually even more heavily than Aurum did, in the First Dragon's Blood War, the uprising against the gods. There is a secret that most of the world does not know. That from time to time, and especially back when the gods were powerful and their domains vast, there is a primal force of the cosmos that the gods call the twinning. This force, occasionally, when gods grow too great and too powerful, will sweep through Vanis and split the gods. This occurred shortly before the First Dragon's Blood War, and a number of the gods had lesser deities broken off of them. You had Fleur and Dulce, who were broken from Sanguinem, And you had Zeramis, who was broken from Ardent. Ardent, the lord of growth and civilization, ended up having Zeramis broken from him as the god or goddess, their gender is not indicated in lore, of light and progress. And while Ardent's focus became, as his domains narrowed to civilization, the growth of civilization itself, the bringing together of communities, Zeramis sought progress, which is change, essentially, within the world in whatever way possible. It is change from one thing to another, the growth of the world itself. To this end, they joined up in the fight against the gods because they saw it as change, as something new. Unfortunately, they were harshly punished for their actions. Felis broke them apart into 8, and the Great Drakes, as their final act in the wake of the First Dragon's Blood War, took their body and forged 8 new gods from them. But we'll come to that eventually. Still open to have anybody butt in at any time if they would like to ask questions. But until then, I will forge onward. Next, I will talk about 2 completely unknown gods on the face of Vanis. So in one of my previous videos, I've talked about the planes. I've talked about Mechanus and its unique existence within my world, and also I just realized I never plugged my light in. Yes, also, hello, Chi, and please feel free to ask questions if you'd like. Look at that, it actually works this time. So, talking about Mechanus, it would be difficult to talk about Mechanus without talking about its origin. I can go on for quite a while about this one. There is a god, unknown on the face of Vanis, known as Eurus. That's I-U-R-I-S. He is the great dragon of order. He holds domains over order, law, craftsmanship, and inspiration. Now, with those domains, of course, it would seem like he'd be a very widely worshipped god. However, his existence has been erased by the other gods. And I do have some notes in other places, so allow me to pull those up. All right. So, the pantheon of Vanis considers Eurus to be a false god. And to this end, they have erased his knowledge from existence. And the reason why is because he was not born, he was made by people. Way back in the day, in the early ages of Vanis, there were a people that existed on Vanis known as the Malu. And the Malu were beings that greatly enjoyed order, they enjoyed structure, advancement, craftsmanship, and they found distaste in the chaos of the world and the entropy of life. So compelled by their love for order and aided by their great intelligence and industriousness, the Malu began to forge the greatest machine ever to be seen on the surface of Vanis. 300 years, it said, were poured into the creation of a mighty fusion of magic and mechana, until at last the god Eurus took his false life, a power beyond even the Malu's imagining. Fueled with purpose, Eurus led his people to march upon the world, seeking to establish an absolute order upon it. They spread to every corner, and they sought order through control. But the people fought back. After a mighty war and many losses, Eurus and his followers left the world behind, considering it nothing more than a lost cause, and forged the realm of Mechanus, a plane of divine order and perfection. Now, there's some more nuance to this. Eurus didn't just withdraw because of a loss. He withdrew because as he grew, and as he began to understand the nature of the universe and the world as this war raged, he began to understand that although he represented a divine order, perfect order could not be achieved within the universe. The universe must have a balance of order and chaos in order to survive. There is a scale, and he came to understand that pure order would mean stasis. The universe would never change. It would cease to exist, and it would stop in a moment of time because there would no longer be change. Meanwhile, of course, diverging entirely into chaos is exactly the opposite. The universe would break apart as change would become so rapid and so commonplace that nothing could become solid and real. So the Malu and Eurus, as they forged Mechanus, made it their divine goal to balance the cosmos of Vanis, to ensure that order and chaos were maintained in a healthy manner. Now, something that people don't know very often, even those that manage to touch on the very, 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 very little lore that there is remaining about Eurus, is the singular nature of his existence. Like I've mentioned before, Eurus, or rather, also hello, Demons, welcome. Thank you very much for the follow. I know exactly who you are. As I mentioned before, Mechanus is a singular plane. Unlike all of the other planes, where you have these various instances, these various realities, mirrors of Vanis, where choices will split off, new worlds essentially, major events that split into different ways, will create a world where, say, the war had an opposite outcome, and then this one over here, I know I'm describing this very poorly. Mechanus, though, is singular. While all of the other planes have an instance within this instance of Vanis, this little universe, Mechanus rides across them all and balances each of them. What makes Eurus such a perfect god for order is that the people who created him, his existence, was a fixed point across all of the universes. It was a binding agent, essentially. So he came into being at the same moment across all of these other dimensions. A very, very cosmically ordered being. This is why there's only one Mechanus, because there is only one Eurus. Cool, so that is one of the unknown gods. Also, again, for viewers that have just joined, I am talking your ears off with lore about the gods right now of my world, but please at any moment butt in with any questions that you have about the world. I've mostly been going down this path just to inspire any questions that you might have, since I know people might not be familiar with my world. Feel free to let me know if you would like me to talk about something. If you found me through other medium, through Reddit or through Discord, then you'll know that I am also open to discussing people's homebrews. If you have things that you would like me to judge, to speak about, then throw them at me, and I will talk about that. Or you can throw me inspiration for like a new magic item. I will write it live here. You will get to see me struggle to balance it. as you watch. So, moving on to the last god on my main list here, we have Paresh, the fledgling god. Now, this one is a big secret that my players are not allowed to discover. So players, if you're watching this episode, I will bring your characters down a level. I swear to God, I'll do it. Tune out now. Okay. Anyway, Paresh, the fledgling god, is known to a very, very, very rare few across Vanis, and it's because he never truly joined the pantheon. Or rather, there is no set point at which he did. The reason for this is Paresh is none other than the god of time. He's the god of time, rejuvenation, divination, and peace. With the second Dragon's Blood War brewing, and Felis turning against the mother and father, they knew that, given his power, which was both of theirs combined, they may very well lose the battle and perish. And so in secret, Lady Surgaya and the Lord Vanis had a second son, a true son of their flesh and blood. And this was Paresh, the fledgling god of time. Welcome, Jinx. Welcome back. Thank you for listening in. He was born as a failsafe, an opposite to Felis. Felis being the lord of holy war, Paresh was the god of peace, and of course of time, the ability to travel across it, the ability to control the flow of it, to ensure the structure of time. And this was his leg up on Felis. Unfortunately, being a young god and having very few followers and no one having knowledge of him, his power was very limited. And so rather than bringing him to face and to fight Felis in the war, he was instead hidden away. He and his very few followers vanished. Legend says, as his mother and father fell into their slumber, Paresh slowly traveled the world and gathered his followers, testing the waters of his power and discovering his domains. Felis, of course, discovered this and turned his loyal dragons upon the young god and his followers. This was actually the turning point, the tipping point into the true Second Dragon's Blood War. So, big secret. Do not tell my players, because this is something that they will discover. Though Paresh had foreseen this day, being the god of time, he had not yet the power to face his brother. Instead, he gathered his followers upon the isle that he had claimed as his home and pulled it from existence itself, protected but lost outside of time within the ether. To this day, only whispers are told of the lost Isle of Time, and none think it more than a simple legend. This, of course, gives me some great potential in the future, which I think I might make use of. Again, don't tell my players, but they have actually... yes, there is what is it? Those mages that can fiddle with time. I forget their names. In any case, time mages, something like that. There was an order. It started with an S. Anyway, that's Elder Scrolls. This is my world. So don't tell my players, but they have actually discovered their first whisper of Paresh. They haven't done any follow-up. I'm actually laughing to myself about this because this is something that I thought that Aelin, being such a lover of secrets, would delve headfirst into the moment that she found it. At the manor that they've acquired, the man that previously owned it had statues to several gods in the back area in little shrines. And they were able to identify 3 of them. Adwin, let's see, they were able to identify Adwin, the Lady of the Tome. They were able to identify Rance, Lord of Storms, the man being from King Ra. Worship is kind of heavy over there. And they are pretty close to identifying Esper, because she has a very distinctive look to her. But there is also a statue to Paresh. It was the only statue that was depicted as a man with multiple arms. And that one, I think, is going to take them a while. So that concludes this big list of gods. Of course, there are more. There are certain ones that I haven't truly built the lore of yet. They've caught whispers as well of what are called the oppositional gods, which there are still a number of gods that aren't in this list that were created with the twinning, mostly small gods that never received enough supplication to grant them power, or whose domains were so small that they might as well merely be demigods able to be killed by mortals. Some of them may not even exist anymore. But I have names of a few of those. If I jump back into my lore tab, I have like 90 documents. Don't at me. Here we are. So, and I can tell you of a few. A mortal needs more than just supplication in order to get powers. However, it is possible for a mortal to become a god. And this may or may not factor into plot lines that I have going on, although I think the players as yet are completely unaware of it. So, wink wink, nudge nudge. So here are a couple of the oppositional gods that I have started on. We have Abrok, the god of austerity and scarcity. So something, of course, that you need to know about the twinning is that once gods represented like both sides of themselves. Some of them still do, but for powerful ones, like Orm, the goddess of gold, of greed, of fortune and wealth, at one point also embodied austerity and scarcity, because they were 2 sides of the same coin, until the secret twinning came and split her, and you ended up with Abrok, the god of austerity and scarcity, in direct opposition to Arum. So then you have the oppositional god to Surgaya, known as Solanus, god of the broken chains and the burned path. So while you have Surgaya, who is colloquially known as the Lady of Fate, you also have Solanus, who is this destroyer of fates and the bringer of ultimate freedom. So you might think this makes them a good god, but not necessarily. They consistently seek to rip apart the threads of fate and hide the future, freeing all creatures from the bounds of fate, no matter the consequences, left entirely to their choices instead of divine guidance. Secrets are the best. I love secrets. So does Aelin. Especially don't tell her. She has to discover those. Next we have Malchus, the god of the revealing light. He is in opposition to Vanis. He is... So you have Vanis, lord of mists and vanishing, who draws into his darkness all of that which may destroy or burn away the world. Secrets that should not be known, that would cause destruction. He is a good god. But then you have Malchus. He is the searing light, seeking to burn away all that is hidden. He demands that all things live in the purity of their own being, ultimately true to their nature and unchanging. His light seeks to unveil all truths for all eyes to see, to eradicate the concept of lies and secrets. All those who break from their paths or are false in their words, he will destroy. So he is the harsh opposite of Vanis. After that, we have Nefrate. Sorry, this one's hard to pronounce. Nafarate, the god of wrath and rage. This god was twinned from Sanguinum. Sanguinum being the goddess not just of first life, of life, being the creator of the first life on Vanis. She also holds domains over birth, blood, and love. She is, in fact, the goddess of love. So Nafarate embodies the opposite of those aspects. He is the purveyor of mankind's darkest emotions. Nafarate cultivates the great works that can be produced through fury and wrath, encouraging mortals to give in to vengeance and bitterness. There are more... Yeah, well, you would like rage. Barbarian. There are, of course, more oppositional gods. Not necessarily one for every main god on the list. Sometimes even two for one main god. The twinning is a bit of a misleading term, because it didn't just like create twins of the gods. It sometimes split them into multiple parts. Like another big secret. Surgaya, the main goddess, although she is known as the Lady of Fate, colloquially, this is only historically accurate. Though she holds domain over the web of life and can look through the weave and see the paths of the future, the multiple paths and what decisions will lead to them, and tweak these strands, she does not lord over fate. Fate is different than probability. Fate is a designated path for a creature. It is an end that they will always reach. And this domain she lost long ago in a twinning, when the actual goddess of fate, just fate, was made. But her existence is pretty much lost. That's, of course, another story. That concludes those. I still see no questions so far, which is more than fine because I still have more gods to talk about. So outside of the main pantheon, outside of all of these that I've talked about, outside of the oppositional gods, you do have other gods that are worshipped on the surface of Vanis. The Jaina peoples of Salika have their own small pantheon. They recognize, of course, the main gods of the world and still pay them heed, but they have their own gods, ones that created them. Let's jump back to when I talked about Zeramis, the god that was split away from Ardent, Lord of Growth and Civilization. So Zeramis was, of course, the betrayer god of light and progress and change. And when they were defeated, they were rent into 8 pieces. And these pieces, the great drakes, the first and most powerful children of the gods, before they departed the world, they turned into curators. They forged their bodies into gods known as the Muses. Now, 4 of these are lost to time, the 4 fallen. Let's begin by talking about the 4 Muses that still exist in worship today. And you'll excuse me a moment as I get my notes. So, the lore for the Muses actually existed before my world. I wrote it as a one-off for a separate campaign, and I liked the lore so much that I kept it for the people that it originally represented. The four main muses are known by the names Sharesh, Hasesh, Minesh, and Razesh. And this short little story is the tale of their creation. In a time where the lands were still fresh, and the war of the first great drakes had only just quelled, the plains of Shalika, as it was known then, lay empty, their forests barren. With the betrayers slain, sealed, and scattered, the great drakes wept for the destruction of that their world had felt, and the wounds their mothers and fathers, the mighty dragon gods, had suffered. From their tears did flow lakes and rivers, joining with the ocean, and the drakes left their children behind, fleeing to the corners of the worlds, as the gods lay to slumber. But the drakes of Shalika let not their land be unattended, for before they parted, they drew up from the dust the bodies of the four great muses. In this strange land, this empty home, the muses wandered, tending its forests and abiding the beasts of the trees, mount, and vale, for many a cycle of seasons with not another soul in sight. This comes from the oral lore of the tribes of Vanis. So of course you'll see some elements are missing. Originally, as you and I know, it was 8 that were made. We'll get to what happened to the other 4. Additionally, they were not drawn from the dust. They were drawn instead from the body and blood of a true god, thus granting them their power. So in Jaina society, you have Sharesh, muse of life and death. She is credited with the creation of the Jaina themselves. They were brought into being by her. She is said to spin the web of life forever from her loom, stretching out each thread to its full length before severing it and weaving it into a great and eternal tapestry that will be hung in the halls of Ninra at the end of time. She's invoked in battle to protect a warrior's strand and sever your foes. Then you have Hasesh, who is the muse of the moon and dream, not to be confused as the goddess of the moon, Alunair, and the Jaina do recognize these two as separate. Hasesh is said to have placed the glittering rings in the sky of Vanis. Fun fact for you, yes, there are rings that surround Vanis, like Saturn. And used their light to weave the veil that separates the dream from the waking world. Now, the dream is what the Jaina used to refer to the outer planes and the Astra, the astral sea, because early on in years, dreams, of course, shaped reality. And to them, this is still where their spirits travel when they dream. It is this veil that she wears in her depictions, hiding her face and figure, representing the mystery that she is. She's often called upon to resolve questions or foretell the future. So the reason that she is credited as the muse of the moon, even though we already know there is the goddess Alunair, who is the actual moon, is because in the original story of the weaving of the veil, when she cast the rings of Vanis into the sky, she went to Alunair and asked for a fragment of her light. And this she imbued into the rings, making them shine even in the darkest night when Alunair did not. And then it was from the light of these rings that she wove the veil itself. This protection against the other planes. Next we have Minesh, who is the muse of knowledge and art. Now this one, of course, is very obvious. It was Minesh who is said to have had the idea to raise the orb of light, the relic of the great drakes, from the first waters. She is the patron of Evigena, scholar or bard, and Minesh grants... Ooh, it's falling into an accent, sorry. Grants inspiration to all those that call upon her. It is also said that she granted Jana the gift of a higher Rama, which is to say thought, raising them above the mere beasts of the land, which of course is very important to the Jaina, being the beastkin bearing great resemblance to beasts, since they have among their midst tabaxi who look like cats. You have the horses, you have the loxodon, tigers, all of this. This is important to their history, a differentiation between themselves and the base beasts that are so similar to them in many ways that so many people compare them to. So last of the four, you have Razesh, the muse of light and the sun, and of magic. This is a bit of a lie, but we'll get to that in a minute. Razesh is not only credited with bringing the first fires of the sun to the first Jaina, but holds the honor of presiding over the elements and being patron of the magical arts. It is said that while Hasesh guards the world from the influence of the Astra, Razesh opens the door for Liria, or mages, to draw upon its power. This is important to note because when the veil was first cast over Venice by Hasesh, it locked out all of the creatures of the other planes and ensured that they couldn't invade, because so much of their time, their energy had been dedicated to the destruction of demons and devils and invading forces from other planes. This was why the veil was created in the first place, but the unintended consequence of it was that it also pushed aside all of the aether and locked it out. Nothing could exit and nothing could enter this plane. And so, slowly but surely, even the muses began to lose their power. Magic had completely vanished from the world. It was Razesh that brought it back. In a fit of inspiration, and with the final vestiges of her power before it depleted, she carved what was known as the first chartered stone. She made the first runes and brought them into being. And she tore from her face her eyes, casting one into the Astra, into the source of magic, and sinking the other into the chartered stone, binding these runes as a gateway for magic to enter the world. And aether was brought back into the prime material plane. So you can thank her for being able to cast spells nowadays. Her runes were also the ones from which all modern runes are derived. There's plenty more stories about them. We have the story of the Orb of Light. We have the full story of the Rings and Veil of Hasesh, their creation of the first Jaina. But since I am talking about gods right now, would like to skip instead to the Four Fallen. Missing from the stories of the modern Jaina are the stories of the Four Fallen, the four other muses that were made by the great drakes before they departed. My players have only just discovered this. There is a Jaina scholar in their midst, and slowly but surely, as they delve into ruins and now even speak to peoples who have been in slumber for 1,500 years before the turn of the age, they are beginning to uncover some of the truth behind who the Four Fallen were. And I shall pull up my notes. So the Four Fallen. This knowledge, also, you should not share with my players, because I'm going to delve deeper into the Fourfallen than they know. Right now, they have only names, and in one instance, at least, knowledge of what the Fourfallen represented. We have, first, Turash, the muse of memory and lies. Turash, it was Turash's duty to curate memory, to ensure its integrity, its stability, because memory is a part of one's soul. He was meant to safeguard this for the people of the world, and in particular, once the Jaina were made, the Jaina. However, this task became too much for him. He became corrupted when he began to alter and create memories, and this turned him into the muse of lies. They sought at first to alter dark memories, to relieve people of their trauma, to cut out people's pain. It started first as a kindness, but though people felt better from it, it also made them weaker, because this pain, this trauma, these memories of theirs are what reminded them not to return to the things that once hurt them. And so they did, again and again and again, even as he erased and erased and erased those memories that hurt them, they would return over and over and over. Like an artist running away from their work, they fell into the creation of memories, finding themselves jealous of Hasesh's dreams. Where Hasesh wove new creations, he began to weave new memories, putting them into people, things that had never happened, stories that he wrote. Unlike dreams, though, these lies altered the reality in people's minds to great ill. And so eventually he was labeled traitor. I have no idea if anybody else can verify if stuff is popping on your end, or if that is just jinx. So next we have Jarash. And Jarash is a very important one. Jarash, well, you'll remember I said that it is a slight lie to say that Razesh is the muse of the light and the sun. She is... Oh, dang it. Well, hecky. Is it mostly going robot in my voice or in the music? Because we'll see if we can fix that. Maybe I can listen to myself too. This may be a little bit hard. Oh. Yeah. I do see that. It seems to be... I seem to be losing... like, packets along the way. Interesting. It shows... my bitrate shows that it's fine. I'm at, like, 3,000 kilobytes per second. Maybe there's just too much going on. Maybe we'll try this. I'm just going to shift my scene for a minute and see if this will help. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to listen to myself talk for a minute. Yeah, okay, it may just be that it's... trying to send too much data at once, because it's only when I am on this scene. Yeah, so the sound effect is layered into the source. Let me see if I can, like, remove some sources, and maybe can think a little bit less about things, and that way not have to do so much. And I am sorry, of course, about interrupting the wonderful lordom that was going on, but this is slightly important, especially since this will be up on my YouTube later. Goodbye, stickers.
You're not using voice meter, are you?
No, I'm not using voice meter. See, we have a background loop. We have... Now, none of this caused a problem before, which is why it's throwing me slightly. And I may just need to go offline and back online in order to make it work. Let me see. Okay. Test. Nope, still doing it. Well, my boyfriend is looking into this right now, so hopefully we can have this fixed quickly. Thank you for pointing that out, by the way, because I would have just kept on talking. Let's see.
Is the microphone plugged in properly? I hear an echo or ringing.
The microphone is, yeah, and this only just became a problem, really.
Have you had any encoding warnings? Encoder warnings?
I have not had any encoder warnings.
The voice meter has been really good button. I don't know what to do when it's stuttering for the bass.
What is the typical... If I change my audio settings in OBS, will that affect anything? Because right now my audio is sample rate 48 kilohertz.
If you have any kind of equipment that is set to 44 and you have it set to 48 in OBS, it will distort eventually. So you can try changing the sample rate to 44.
Okay.
See if that fixes it all. I can hear the ringing.
The program must be restarted for these settings to take effect.
See? You hear it?
Hear what?
Do you hear this ringing, that little ringing?
It's just the fan.
Oh, so that's just, it's picking up. It's fine.
Yeah, it's just picking up the fan. I would have to restart OBS in order to change the bit rate. Okay, well, everyone, we are going to take a brief intermission while I attempt to sort this out. It may just need to be a reset. I will be back very shortly, hopefully with everything fixed and no more distortion. Thanks very much. And I will see you soon.